Bridgerton this, Bridgerton that. Bridgerton is a show which is everywhere right now. It's in your salads, it's in your cupboard, it's in the bathroom, it's everywhere you look. I have to break it to you, this video is contributing to that. If you clicked on this video as a part of your journey to watch Bridgerton without actually watching Bridgerton, you're kinda in the right place. Just let me pause and explain what Bridgerton is. Bridgerton is a romantic historical drama set during Regency era England, and it revolves around the affairs of the upper crust of society, the ton. So essentially, to more specifically define the Regency era, it was a time period which took place from 1811 to 1820. In England, this era officially started when King George III was considered unfit to rule and his son, George IV, had to rule in his place. Along with the new ruler, this era brought unique fashion, developments in the arts, refined customs, and a rigid social structure, including the development of a subsection of society called le bon ton. When you think of le bon ton, think really rich people, extravagant dresses, extravagant lifestyles. Yeah, they're very rich, very fancy. Bridgerton specifically focuses on the chaos, triumphs, and struggles faced by different members of one family within the ton, the Bridgerton family. I forgot to emphasize, one specialty of Bridgerton is that they will give you a fully cooked love story, a whole journey you go on. The amount of emotions I have poured into that show over a relationship that has blossomed over the course of 8 episodes, they know how to tell a love story. With this context, we can return to the matter at hand, discussing the newest season of Bridgerton. Ever since the first half of season 3 of Bridgerton has dropped, I've seen much commotion over Colin Bridgerton and Penelope Featherington finally becoming lovers after years of deep friendship. This video will not be discussing that, as I found a different relationship rather intriguing to my eye. I want to be a diamond of YouTube, what can I say? And diamonds are rare. I can't just discuss any subject in Bridgerton. I make myself laugh. Anyways, when discussing the recent season with my friend, one of my dearest friends, may I add, she brought up how she found Francesca's character to be quite boring. And to be honest, at least in that moment, I somewhat agreed with that, because prior to this season, I did not know who Francesca Bridgerton was. She just seemed like another background character to make the Bridgerton family so full and lively. This is Francesca Bridgerton, if you had no idea who she is. However, upon reflecting further on this season, I realized that the Bridgerton writers were onto something with Francesca's plotline this season. Francesca's love plotline differs a lot from the other Bridgerton love plotlines. Now that you know what Bridgerton is, we can actually get to discussing the topic of today's video, which is Francesca Bridgerton and her love life, or her love plotline in season 3 of the show. I mean season 3 of the show so far. I honestly don't know what the Bridgerton writers have up their sleeves. But before we jump into discussing how Francesca ends up finding her love in this first half of the season, it's important to establish what kind of person she is, because our behavior, our attitudes can influence our interactions with others. First off, Francesca Bridgerton is much more reserved in comparison to her siblings. This leads her to using communication, like verbal communication, only when she feels she really needs to. She's not usually the type to engage in constant talking, especially when the constant talking jumps into a subject which is rather intimate or just something deeper than surface level conversation. In episodes 1 through 3, Francesca uses decorum to deflect deeper conversation. In episode 1, it's with suitors she barely knows. Episode 2, it's with a suitor who has a shared interest with her, so she's a little bit more comfortable. And in episode 3, it's with Lord Samadani, who is the match the queen proposes for her, someone she's more acquainted with. Because they've had several occasions where they've had to stand by each other or sit by each other and get along. In all of these cases, the suitors or suitor try to say something which gets the conversation to go deeper and to possibly spark a connection. What I find interesting is that in all of these situations, regardless of how close Francesca was with the suitor, she used politeness or decorum to deflect further conversation with them. What that indicated to me was that she doesn't really like engaging in constant conversation, especially when the conversation feels overwhelming to her, as was the case with episode 1, or feels uncomfortable to her, as was the case with episode 2 and episode 3. You could also say that these scenes just show how Francesca's a bit more awkward. But as we look at her relationship with her love interest this season, so far, her love interest so far, John Sterling, you'll see that her struggle to keep up conversation is about more than just general awkwardness. Another key characteristic of Francesca, aside from how much she loves music, especially the pianoforte, or however you say it, is that Francesca Bridgerton does not like excessive attention or pressure. This can be seen in several instances throughout this half of the season, particularly with her suitors and her mother. You can also see Francesca's dislike of attention when she's talking with Eloise, and she's saying that she welcomes the prospect of marriage so then she can get it over with and get over with the attention and pressure of the season and being pushed as the queen's favorite. And another, I guess, smaller characteristic that's assigned to her is that she's allegedly very practical, and that might be making it hard for her to find love, genuine love, not just a marriage proposition that fulfills a requirement. Here is photographic evidence that she is described as practical. Along with this, Francesca is very self sufficient, kind of satisfied with life, lives through it as it goes. She has a very laid back attitude to the different customs of the season. And the season can be described as a period of time where girls of age are trying to find suitors. You can see this trait very clearly towards the end of episode 1. Towards the end of episode 1, the day after Francesca's first ball, after debuting in society, Violet, the Bridgerton mother, she's the lady of the household, notices that Francesca is not as involved or enthusiastic about the balls and finding a match. So, Violet tries using a music metaphor in hopes that it will help Francesca be more invested in the process. Francesca responds to Violet's insistence on being excited about the season with how she's not afraid of the customs of the seasons and how love is rare and how she doesn't feel the need to feel butterflies or unexpected harmony. This part shows how she's satisfied with her life right now, and she just treats the whole season as something to be done, not something that's necessarily life enhancing or life changing. Showing not only how practical she is, but how relaxed her attitude towards life is. Furthermore, Violet, towards the end of the conversation, asks if Francesca will be open to love if she stumbles upon it. And the picture you see on screen is Francesca's response. Let us see what happens. Furthermore, enforcing or highlighting how Francesca is so nonchalant and, to put it simply, she's just so chill with life. Like, the season is not that big of a deal for her. This isn't to say she's not putting in effort to be polite and to act accordingly during the season. I bring this trait up to show how Francesca just sees these events as another moment in her life, allowing her to be open but not necessarily insistent that she has to find a suitor. It also explains why she'd rather play piano than attend a social function. Now that we've discussed who Francesca is, we can finally dive into her relationship with John Sterling. The two end up meeting when Francesca is taking a break from the chaos of talking to suitors by standing outside of the ball near this fireplace thing. As she's standing there, John Sterling walks to the same area. He stands a decent distance away from her. And rather than talking a lot like the other suitors, he ends up just asking if he can join her in basking in the silence, which is very strange when you look at it at first, but if you think about Francesca's character, this is a match made in heaven, because the main issue with Francesca's other suitors is that they were too forward or they were too talkative. They didn't understand her introverted nature. In episode 4, John Sterling goes to see Francesca in the Bridgerton residence the following morning after the ball where they met. They only introduced themselves to each other this morning, and the lack of formalities the night before, yet a strong unspoken connection between them, show how they prefer a much more quiet, relaxed manner to creating an honest emotional connection with each other. Also, when he asks her to join her for a moment, Francesca is smiling with teeth, like the brightest smile ever. Given Francesca's usually reserved nature, Francesca's giant smile in this instance just highlights how truly content she is in the presence of John Sterling. The moment he proposes ends up with both of them just sitting next to each other and staring at a wall. But as evidenced by the little glances and their small smiles and the lightness in their eyes, they clearly like the connection between them and they're comfortable in the silence between them. As these two are staring at the wall, Eloise and Violet Bridgerton are commenting on how interesting it is that these two are just sitting together in silence, adding how, along with this lack of verbal communication, the lack of formalities makes this spark between John Sterling and Francesca rather unconventional and surprising, but not in a bad way. Lord Samadani shows up and interrupts the quiet moment between Francesca and John Sterling. Lord Samadani's outspoken nature and expressiveness makes him a symbol of conventional romance. Francesca's withdrawn reaction to Lord Samadani versus John Sterling shows how love is personal. Francesca's attention to Lord Kilmartin, aka John Sterling, is so evident throughout the rest of episode 4, as once Francesca spots John Sterling, she walks up to him in the middle of the street and starts conversation. Considering she's not very much a conversationalist, her choice to walk up to him and start an interaction with him just shows how much she cares. And in this conversation, Francesca says different things like, "Oh, I was hoping to see you at this event. Oh, are you talking to us because you wanted to or just to be polite?" Alluding to interest in him. But John Sterling, being a little more reserved than Francesca in comparison, he responds to all her points rather curtly. And even though he's not saying much, he can sense that the vibe is off, so he asks her about the music that's playing in the street. Francesca shares that she doesn't like the music and thinks that it would be better if it was played in a different manner. Following this conversation, John Sterling quickly excuses himself and rushes off. And for Francesca, someone who communicates more effectively with what isn't said, immediately thinks that he's rushed off because he doesn't like her or was bothered by her in that instance, which you'll see is very much not true. Later in episode 4, Francesca's at yet another ball and she's just concluded with dancing with Lord Samadani. And the strange smiles that she reserved for other suitors are put into play with Lord Kilmartin right now. Because at this point, Francesca's like, bro, why did you just leave me hanging? You clearly hate me. But Lord Kilmartin quickly realizes that his action wasn't received correctly, so he uses verbal communication to clarify what he meant. He elaborates that he's more a man of actions rather than words, as he hands her sheet music of the music that was playing in the streets, except this sheet music is adjusted based on her comments that she made to him. In response to all this, a wide grin spreads across Francesca's face. Given that Francesca usually acts very poised and she loves music, this action did not go unappreciated. The lack of restraint in her smile, in fact, shows how genuinely happy she is to receive this sheet music, and she wants him to know that in order to express her continued interest in him. You may be confused on how I reached that conclusion, but I assure you there's reasoning. Earlier at this ball, when Francesca saw Lord Kilmartin, she said that she was too parched after dancing with Lord Samadani, so she couldn't talk. It's not this dialogue which indicates to Lord Kilmartin that Francesca is frustrated with him, not on good terms with him. It's her withdrawn body language and facial expressions which show it. Therefore, her non-verbal communication, such as her wide smile, expressed her innermost thoughts. Her interest in Lord Kilmartin is furthermore highlighted when she asks to leave the ball early and doesn't accept the lemonade that Lord Samadani has brought for her. Oh my gosh, I do feel a bit bad for him, but for some of us, what's unsaid is what captures our hearts. Also, those little smiles between Lord Kilmartin and Francesca, ugh, they're too precious! They clearly like each other's company, even if the Queen hates it. Call me a traitor to the Queen, but I'm supporting them. They're too precious! Ah! Excuse me, I don't know where that came from. Unlike me, Francesca Bridgerton and John Sterling don't like to yap. Rather, their chemistry comes from mutual understanding and actions. And it's so clear that they like each other, not by what they say to each other, but by the gestures and smiles and other actions that they offer to each other. And it's just, it's so precious. I love it. I am here for it. Oh my gosh, the introverts won. The introverts won. This relationship also works well because their more casual or quiet form of romance does not involve too much pressure. Because there's less pressure involved, Francesca is more able to explore the connection. Also, it allows her to be satisfied with the relationship, providing a good foundation for a sincere connection. Oh my gosh. My hair is progressively getting worse. I'm so sorry, guys. It's just very hot right now. So my hair is just becoming floof. Yeah, this might make it hard for me to become YouTube's diamond, but it's okay. If you like and subscribe, one strand of my hair will become less frizzy. By having this love blossom between two characters who are more withdrawn, Bridgerton is showing how love can come about in different ways and doesn't necessarily require certain steps to be accomplished. Everyone's love story happens in their own unique way, which complements their lifestyle and personality. Francesca Bridgerton and John Sterling's love story is not only iconic in context of the Bridgerton universe. The relationship between Francesca Bridgerton and John Sterling is also iconic in terms of representation of love in media. How exactly, you ask? Well, thankfully for you, I had much free time and I have found some sources showing you how exactly Francesca Bridgerton and John Sterling's relationship is a really thoughtful portrayal of love. Before explaining how iconic Francesca Bridgerton and John Sterling's relationship is, it is important to discuss what makes a strong romantic relationship. In this entire section, I'll be shorthanding romantic relationship to relationship just for ease of discussion. According to Psychology Today, maintaining a strong relationship requires constant care and communication, and certain traits have been shown to be especially important for fostering healthy relationships. Such traits include a commitment of time and attention to your partner or partners, depending on your relationship structure, and also an ability to constantly try understanding and navigating through any differences. Keep in mind that these traits only promote a strong relationship when all individuals involved in the relationship express the trait. The article also notes some good indicators of a potential suitable match for someone. Some indicators of a good potential match are that they push you to explore your sense of self, they make you worried about how you're appearing to them because you view them highly, you have a high motivation or desire to spend time with them, and you're willing to put in a lot of time, emotion, and energy into maintaining the relationship with them. As I discussed earlier, Francesca Bridgerton and John Sterling have a love story which emerged in a manner different from the other Bridgertons, as the love stories in previous season required this will, this passion, which took form in the words and grand gestures and intense pressure of internal and external forces. Those stories were much more flashy in comparison to Francesca Bridgerton and John Sterling's love story. I'll be using the indicators to discuss the relationships since Francesca and John's relationship is not as developed as the other Bridgerton relationships, and for that reason, the potential match indicators are a more common point of comparison as to understanding all of the relationships. The main Bridgerton couples in the last two seasons, Daphne and Simon in season 1 and Anthony and Kate in season 2, displayed the first two indicators very strongly in their relationship arcs. Daphne and Simon's relationship in season 1 started as a fake relationship between two people who literally did not get along. This clash in attitudes and lifestyles ended up being the exact pressure and force needed to allow both Daphne and Simon to explore and expand their own definition of their identities. Most clearly evidenced by the monologues and the different actions they each take throughout the course of their relationship developing. The second indicator of being stressed around someone whose opinion you view highly is shown through both Daphne and Simon in one particular scene. It's the scene where Simon says his iconic "I burn for you" monologue. In this scene, both Daphne and Simon show intense frustration with sharing what's really on their mind. Because they regard each other's attitudes, dialogue, actions so highly. Like, Simon expresses his intense yearning and also intense guilt for not being able to give Daphne the exact life she wants in the future, while Daphne expresses how much she's wanted him to look at her and talk to her more. I broadly covered Daphne and Simon's relationship to show how they exhibit the first two indicators of a good potential match. However, I am aware that their relationship is problematic, particularly due to Daphne's vile action violating Simon later in the season and the careless way it is handled. That wasn't okay for her to do and will never be okay. Kate and Anthony do also exhibit this first indicator in a manner similar to Daphne and Simon, but they also strongly exhibit the second indicator I mentioned from the article. The second indicator essentially entails the stress you feel, particularly when you're interacting with someone or some people who you feel self conscious around because you value their opinion of you so much. For the case of Kate and Anthony, Anthony valued Kate's opinion so much because he viewed her as a worthy adversary, as seen by the horse riding adventures they have. Kate also felt stress when interacting with Anthony because he would keep saying or doing things that irked her. And this caused a lot of stress for her because, meanwhile, she was dealing with this guy, she also had to make sure that her younger sister was being perceived well in the town. Before she and Anthony got together, Anthony was originally planning on marrying Kate's little sister. Due to these factors, Kate found it increasingly important that her family and she as well make a good impression to not only Anthony Bridgerton but the Bridgerton family, hence allowing her to exhibit that second indicator of stress when you're worried about how you're coming off to another person, which was in this case Anthony. I will say it was very messy how Anthony stuck with like his marriage to Kate's little sister Edwina until literally the last moment. Oh my gosh. I get that Kate is partially at fault, but this man, I can't. Keeping that aside, the conditions of their relationship with like the expectations of each other are perfect examples of those first two indicators and how they can allow you to find love in another person or people. Unlike the previous two couples that I just discussed, Francesca and John's relationship is built on the latter two indicators: motivation and desire to see them, and investing a lot of time, energy, and emotion into building that relationship up. The indicator of wanting to see the other person more is shown mutually as John calls on Francesca at the Bridgerton residence the following morning after a ball, even though he literally did not know her name. I want to add that when he visited, he was very polite and very courteous. He just wanted to chill with her more. And Francesca also displays this desire to see John more as she spots him in the middle of a bustling street and walks up to him, starting a conversation. The other indicator of investing time, energy, and emotion into the relationship is shown through the different gestures that John and Francesca show. John clearly shows this as he has a piece of music literally rearranged according to Francesca's vision. Francesca invests energy and time through her own gestures as she has a wider smile and a brighter expression when she's around John. As we discussed earlier, Francesca's character is usually more reserved, so her taking the effort to smile and stuff is a symbol of the energy and effort she's willing to put into this person, who is John Sterling. These traits are also evident in Daphne and Simon's relationship as well as Kate and Anthony's relationship through the monologues, the dialogue, the behavior, the extensive scenes that they have together. There's just less dedicated emphasis on it because the first two indicators relating to how your potential match pushes you to explore your sense of self and how they make you stressed out of self-consciousness because you want to interact with them in all of these repeated interactions in a manner where they see you in a good light. It's vice versa for Francesca and John. You see the motivation to see each other and the investment of time, energy, and emotion more clearly. You see those other two indicators less strongly because they don't have these super duper grand gestures and super duper grand monologues to emphasize their presence in the relationship. Now that we've established how these indicators do indeed come into play for Francesca and John, how do we know that their relationship has a strong foundation? Well, we can review those key words in the description of what makes a healthy relationship maintained. The article says that there needs to be constant care and communication as the basis of a relationship for it to be strong and healthy. However, it does not dictate how exactly that constant care and communication looks. Though I will say that it does imply that constant care and communication consists of showing up for your partner consistently, making sure that they feel appreciated, as well as being open to understanding what makes them different from you and being able to navigate those differences with them. For the previous couples, they were able to exhibit these two traits through open dialogue and big grand gestures, as I've been saying throughout this section. But for Francesca and John, although they're not necessarily as talkative, they still show up for each other, as John Sterling visited the Bridgerton residence to see Francesca, and Francesca stopped John Sterling on the street. Both of these instances show how much they're willing to put in the effort for one another. They're also willing to understand one another's differences and navigate through that, because in the scene in episode 4 at the ball, where John Sterling is clarifying that he didn't leave the conversation when they were talking on the street just to abandon her or because he didn't like her anymore, that he left because he wanted to get a rearranged version of the music she heard on the street. Francesca's upset expression kind of disappears in this instance, just showing how she's willing to understand where John came from with his actions. And John's whole gesture of bringing a piece of sheet music just shows how he understands how much music means to Francesca. Overall, showing how they both are willing to see each other's differences, recognize them, and navigate through them. Seeing how John and Francesca have a successful budding romantic relationship shows how love takes form in different ways. This has been addressed in academia, as there's a theory literally suggesting there are different styles of love, where people can be more attuned to some styles of love in comparison to others, depending on their cognitive profile and their personality. Even beyond this, I want to mention that love is such a personal thing, and the construction and maintenance of romantic relationships comes from that. If not love, at least the idea of love founds a romantic relationship. And I'm not saying this off the top of my head. For instance, according to this journal article from Current Directions in Psychological Science, there's a body of evidence pointing to how people may use some decision strategies for their everyday lives, for their romantic lives as well. An example of this cited by the article is that people don't rely heavily on comparison to find a good romantic partner. They use rules like quality measures, which evaluate whether a potential partner is up to their standards or up to their expectations. This article also notes how relationship decisions, such as the decision to stay or leave a relationship, may be influenced by factors about a relationship or factors kind of surrounding a relationship, less relevant to the relationship. This source underlines the subjectivity involved in developing a romantic connection and continuing to pursue it. In a different journal article from Sexuality and Culture, continuing on the same note of relationship decisions, there are many variables that go into a person deciding whether to continue a relationship, such as commitment to the relationship, which comes from whether a person is satisfied with the relationship, whether the alternatives to the relationship are better or not, and how much they're investing in the relationship. I must note that this same journal article also cites another source pointing out that relationship satisfaction is subjective. In yet another journal article from the Journal of Personality and Social Psychology, it's noted that this one study found that although social exchange measures were excellent predictors of couples' final dating status, together or not together, measures of love and relationship maintenance were even better predictors. Let's take a step back. These sources work together to highlight broad observations on the formation and continuation of relationships. All of these sources also work together to highlight how so many factors go into determining whether a relationship is continued. Such variation on the factors which go into a relationship reinforces how the pursuit of love can come about in so many different ways. Romance can look different for everyone. I use the term romance to indicate how people connect romantically and maintain the connection. Bringing it back to Francesca Bridgerton and John Sterling's relationship, their portrayal of love is just a symbol of how romance varies from person to person and love looks different for everyone. Of course, there are shared standards of what love is. Otherwise, love is just a blob in space. But even then, the gray spaces in between that aren't defined by these general standards of love are spaces where individuals figure out what love looks like to them, what love means to them. Hence, I believe Francesca Bridgerton's love plotline is more than just social awkwardness. It's a thoughtful expression of love that's more reserved in how it's expressed, but just as meaningful as the other couples, as Francesca and John do get a good amount of screen time. That is exactly why their relationship is so iconic, not only in Bridgerton, but in today's world. Sorry if the point got lost along the way. It's been a while since I've had to analyze things. We all have different personalities that require support. This support can take form in various ways, though. And Bridgerton's choice to showcase a romantic connection that comes about in a different manner is exact proof of that. This choice shows that everyone is capable of finding love. The journey there is just different. And that's completely okay, as long as the relationship is founded on care and enough open dialogue that the relationship can navigate through obstacles and hurdles. Oh my. I have to get ready for an undisclosed formal event because I'm that exclusive. And honestly, I think you need to get ready too. I wasn't kidding when I said I want to be the diamond of YouTube. So like, comment, and subscribe if you think that this video deserves a gem of your choice. I hope it's a diamond. Please. I want to be the diamond of YouTube, okay? Please. I don't think begging's fit for a queen, so I'm gonna end it there. Bye, guys.